What could possibly be causing this?
Well, I think if you look back of causes, ironically, when I was doing at UCLA, I was working on pancreas transplant where I want to immunosuppress the patients.
Yes, you have to.
Yeah,
right?
because you prevent it. And then I was working on cancer where I don't want to immunosuppress. So I needed to understand the body's mechanism, and we have a crazy, wonderful, exquisite balance in our body. You have the yin and the yang of the killer cells, and these things called natural killer cells and T cells.
Whose job is to kill anything that threatens the body.
Whose job is to kill, quite right, anything that threatens the body, whether the body has infection, if you have TB, you have HIV, if you have hepatitis, you have COVID. These cells are there to recognize these infected cells and kill it. As you and I are sitting here today, our stem cells are growing in order to replenish parts of your body, your heart. If you didn't have that, you wouldn't have a heart. At the age of 14, you need those stem cells. But mathematically, there are some cells that are transformed, and your body recognizes that through these natural killer cells and kills it. I call that nature's first responder. And that's your mechanism. That's how we are all protected, and we are in this state of equilibrium or balance. On the other hand, the moment either the tumor finds a way to hide from these cells, or your body's or the tumor causes these cells to be suppressed. And that's why I call this the suppressor cells. And there are certain cells in your body called Treg cells or myeloid-derived suppressor cells. These are all technical. That when they get upregulated, you've lost your protection. And so the question then is, how do we understand this balance? How do we increase the killers and how do we decrease the suppressors? So that's been 50 years of my challenge and how do we expose the tumor? So on the one hand, you need to expose the tumor because it hides from the killers. On the other hand, you activate the killers. On the other hand, you have to suppress the suppressors. So we're truly playing a good game of chess. And I think like a astrophysicist, where you're looking for God's particle, where all these molecules are floating around, talking to each other. All the cells are floating around, talking to each other, and this dynamic interaction. And how do you understand all of that? One of the best, most fun lectures I gave, I've given a lot of lectures on this and try to be non-technical because it's what I call basic immunology. And the problem with cancer is it's been treated by oncologists and not immunologists. And immunologists don't see patients because they look at basic immunology. And then when you have infection, then you have virology. So this cross disciplines of virology, immunology, oncology, all these ologies don't talk to each other.
Yes.
So
you're saying, just big picture for non-specialists, of which I'm of course one, you're saying that cancer is to some extent a problem with your immune system.
It is everything about your immune system.
So you've got all kinds of defective cells that could become cancer or cancer in your body at all times.
At all times.
But your body is zapping them.
Correct.
Right. And that's the fundamental balance of the human body.
Correct.
And when that body gets out of balance, when the killer cells become suppressed or less effective, that's when you get cancer.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm sorry to interrupt.
I love it because that's the perfect interpretation that I couldn't do in a non-technical way, because I think I get too nerdy. So I'm glad.
Well, you are a doctor.
But that's I think is what's happening in our body. We have these perturbations, but we're in equilibrium, and that's a good thing. The moment you knock yourself out of equilibrium, now what could knock you out of equilibrium? And that's why when, Bobby Kennedy is talking about and standing up about the toxins in our food, the toxins in PFAS, the processed food, and viral infections. And really what knocks you out of balance basically is inflammation. If you have inflammation in your body, there's this, now I'm going to get nerdy again, these cells called neutrophils that actually see an infection and tries to kill it, which it does. But if there's persistent inflammation, these neutrophils actually flip into a suppressor cell. So what people don't realize is that we have the yin-yang in our body, that every cell has a counter cell. And that's where I was about to go there. I said the most fun conversation I had, where I was asked by astrophysicist or physicist to give a lecture, is I named this concept of cancer a quantum theory, like a physicist. And that in our body, we have cells that can be in two states. It can be a killer or a suppressor. And like the Schrodinger's cat, it could be alive or dead. And it depends what you do with it. And so I named this thing quantum oncotherapeutics, just to be controversial, so that doctors could understand what I'm talking about, is that we need to understand the fact that you have a killer T cell and you have a killer suppressor cell. We have an M1 macrophage that actually chomps things up, and M2 macrophages that blocks that. You have an NK cell that kills, and NK cells that inhibits. And we need to have that balance, otherwise you'll get into autoimmune disease. But there's a thing called quantum entanglement, that is this cat alive or is this cat dead? If somebody interacts with that, and the person that interacts with that is the doctor. So you, as a doctor, could either be enlightened enough to activate just the activators and suppress the suppressors and change the dynamic towards the cure. But it's very complex because it's now quantum, because all those changes are happening in minutes in your body. These molecules, like God's particle, where they're colliding with each other and cells are colliding and interacting, happens within minutes. So you need to have a theory of how do you interact at that level. And in so doing, the first thing you need to understand is, how does cancer happen? And then how does it grow? How do you stop it? This idea of a vaccine, a cancer vaccine, do you radiate that cancer? Do you remove that cancer? Do you remove the lymph nodes? Do you give chemotherapy? And crazily enough, over the last 50 years, I figured out that everything we're doing is not the word wrong, because that's a bad statement, a pejorative statement. It's not enlightened, a better way to say it. Because everything we're doing is tipping the scales towards the suppressor cells. We're activating the suppressor cells. We're not activating the killing cells. And we can go into this conversation where I can explain that. So the key system, which you just said, is cancer is all about the immune system. So if you activate the immunosuppression system, you get more cancer. So then the fundamental root cause is, what's activating that immune system?